All right, let's talk about Elon Musk.
Well, really years since Steve Bannon got up in front of CPAC in February of 2017 and claimed that was what the administration was all about. This time around, they have really figured out and have a plan on how they're going to do it. The difference is that Elon Musk, who paid at least $250 million for Donald Trump to become president, has run of the place. I don't know that he's doing it for the same ideological reasons that Steve Bannon is. He's doing it ultimately to benefit himself in a myriad of ways, which could range from getting proprietary secrets on businesses, getting the U.S. business of cutting checks. It could also just be like, Elon Musk has a lot of interests in China, and there may be value to him to undermine certain U.S. operations and functions, frankly. It's unclear. But the bottom line is there are multiple stories, differing stories, that all end up on the basically in the same place, which is to undermine the administrative state, to make our government function worse for its people. And to see if you can find that AP from today. Also, Bradley, I want to play this, but if you can find that AP that I mentioned today, because the way that this story, and we're going to be talking to Nathan about what's going on with the payment system, which is the scariest of all of them, I think. But there is no way that Elon Musk and Doge, whatever status it has now, has the authority to shut down an agency completely unilaterally without any type of legislative action. And, we had this conversation the other day with Elie Mystal. The irony of the demise of the Chevron deference doctrine, which says the courts will defer to agencies when it comes to questions on how to interpret or build upon a broad directive from Congress. And now the courts are saying, no, we will step in and decide if Congress hasn't been explicit, is completely at odds with the idea that the executive agencies have the ability to shut themselves down, which is, of course, in contradictory to what Congress has called for. So we're going to see how this plays out if it ultimately gets to the courts. We should tell you right up front that in an interview in The Hill, I think it was, or no, Semaphore, Chuck Schumer said their strategy is to just do nothing and watch and let them hang themselves by their own petard.
That's literally what the UK Labour did under Boris Johnson the past 4 years.
We will explain why this is a horrible strategy. All right, but here is a audio space, whatever they call it, with two sitting U.S. senators, Mike Lee and Joni Ernst, and Vivek Ramaswamy, what was it that he made all his money on? It was like some type of charlatan scheme. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Alzheimer's drug?
Oh, yes. Yeah, a drug that never really made it big, but there was a big stock.
Help from his mom.
It was a big pump and dump type of situation.
Basically.
And Elon Musk, who is, I don't know what his title is, oligarchic czar of the oligarchs. I'm not sure what it is.
Caesar.
Oligarch czar. And then two sort of like apparently completely inconsequential U.S. senators. Here's Joni Ernst is going to start this off.
Because so much of that taxpayer money is not even going to, we love to feel good about helping starving children and name your country.
Sudan.
But it's not going there. It's going to pay rents in Paris.
Yes, exactly.
It's going to support somebody's fancy dinner to 100%. Entertain whoever.
Pause it. They're talking about USAID, and it may be the case that none of that money goes to helping starving children. Of course, that's not the case, but let's just. And it may be the case that it's all going.
Here's my kind of feeling on the USAID thing. It's good. cut it all, destroy it all. And I know a lot of people are like, Mike, you're saying that USAID is mostly harmful. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The less interference the United States has in other countries' politics, the better the world is going to be. The main purpose of USAID is to prevent the formation of any kind of counterbalance to the United States. It's focused on preventing cooperation in Africa. It's focused on preventing cooperation in Latin America. Because if like Latin America united, it would be a world power. If Africa, sub-Saharan Africa united, if Arabia united, they would be world powers. That could challenge Europe. That could challenge the United States. That's a reality. And so the focus of USAID is to keep these places fractured, to keep dictatorships and pro-American puppets in power, is to interfere with elections. I mean, it is what it is. USAID was running a social network app for Cuban dissidents to try to influence them to overthrow their government. That's just, I mean, they do that constantly. From what I heard, they're moving it under direct control of the State Department. So is it really going away? Yes. Part of what made USAID so successful was the way that it was able to conceal CIA connections. If the State Department is directly funding something, it's very clear who's funding it. When you have 8 different nonprofits called the Endowment to Protect Democracy and Puppies, and somebody says, I'm against the Endowment to Protect Democracy and Puppies, every liberal is a rube. So they just hear what you call yourself and go, that must be what you support. You must be the Support Freedom for Women in Yemen organization. Oh, okay. I'll believe anything you say uncritically. It's good for the mask to come off because a lot of people fall for the mask. That's why you wear a mask. I'll give you an example. Imagine that anytime somebody committed a crime from here on out, they didn't try to conceal their identity. Would that be good or would that be bad? Wow, criminals are so brazen these days. That's bad. It's like, no, it's good when criminals commit crimes out in the open so everybody can see. It's better to know who's doing what. I want the U.S. State Department to directly fund the countries and the groups that we're supporting. I want it to be obvious that we are an anti-democratic, fascistic, dictatorial state. Which is why there were protests in Georgia about laws revealing foreign funding and why the U.S. State Department was openly against it. Exactly.
So Congress writes a law that dictates how USAID spends money to make sure that we're countering Chinese influence inside Africa, to make sure that we don't lose access to critical mineral supplies, so that we're fighting back against Hezbollah in Lebanon. So Congress writes a law that dictates how USAID spends money to make sure that we're countering Chinese influence inside Africa, to make sure that we don't lose access to critical mineral supplies, so that we're fighting back against Hezbollah in Lebanon. So Congress writes a law that dictates how USAID spends money.
I mean, like, there's even more and better clips of this that are longer. Like, where they talk about how USAID is just it's American covert ops.
USAID fights terrorist groups all across this world, making sure that we address the underlying causes for a retreat to terrorism. USAID chases China all around the world, making sure that China doesn't monopolize contracts for critical minerals and port infrastructure all around the world. It supports freedom fighters everywhere in this world. Up until yesterday, delivering firewood, for instance, to the brave Ukrainian defenders on the Eastern Front. USAID fights terrorists.
It supports freedom fighters. It chases China. Now, this is exactly why it's good. It's getting cut. Like, I think that a lot of people who are liberals, who try to posture as leftists, are being exposed right now. The reality is that a lot of bad shit's gonna go down. Cutting USAID, who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck? The less American, I want America to withdraw to her borders. I want America to pull out the troops out of South Korea. I want them to pull the troops out of Japan. I want them to pull the troops out of Germany. I want them to pull the troops out of the Middle East. I want them to sail home. I want us to rip apart aircraft carriers with welding torches and turn them into bridges and plowshares, literally. I want the United States to sit back and solve its own goddamn problems. And that's that. And if you're like, well, what will the world do without American leadership? You're a fucking dope. No, Mike, I'm a devout socialist. I just happen to be from an actual African nation. I understand very well how heavily dependent most of these countries are on USAID development for malaria, which is the #1 cause of death for children. Do you actually think defeating malaria is as hard as... Do you think it's that hard? There used to be endemic malaria in the southern United States, and we got rid of it in a couple of years. They're not doing anything to solve malaria. They're tinkering around the edges. There are millions and millions of people dying from curable diseases, and the American government doesn't care to provide the doses and medicines. Whether it's tuberculosis, whether it's malaria, you're saying that, oh yeah, the USAID throws a couple $2 billion toward humanitarian effort. That means that we should support the US doing fucking coups all over the world. Fuck no. It was endemic. It was wait, do you think that have you heard of the Everglades? What do you mean? Thousands of people will die because of this decision. Millions die because of the USAID. For example, even if you're just talking about like food aid, American food aid destroys domestic agricultural production by undercutting local African labor. So you hollow out the agricultural industry, the indigenous agricultural industry within large swaths of Africa, and you get people dependent upon American food aid. There's a million things that like USAID is a failure. It's not helping Africa. That's why countries that throw out American influence are the ones that develop the best, or ones that the United States selects for actually being able to move up the value chain. A civil affairs team. Okay, here we go, chat. This is what USAID does. Let's go. This is from U.S. Special Operations Vision 2020. This is a vision for 2021 and beyond. U.S. First Special Forces Command Airborne, August 2021. This is a Special Forces operating vision. And they're giving an example. Are you ready? They have a chess pieces, America and China, which is what this is all about. A civil affairs team acting as a civil military support element from the 91st Civil Affairs Battalion on its third tour to a West African nation or Nauru. I can never say these. I can never say shit. Don't make fun of my pronunciation of names. I can't. Was on its way to meet with a local government leader. While driving on the highway, the team noticed a billboard with Chinese characters, a photo of a southern port city, and a prominent yellow ribbon. The CMSE took a photo and continued on their meeting. Upon returning to their team house, they shared the photo with their cross-functional team. a Special Forces Operational Detachment Alpha from the 3rd Special Forces Group, and a Psychological Operations Detachment from the 7th Psychological Operations Battalion. Recognizing the billboard's near-peer competition significance, they developed a plan to investigate the Chinese activity. Each element would gather information from their respective indigenous partners in security, governance, development, and information, while also exploring local, publicly available information. When the CFT reconvened after their reconnaissance efforts, the SFODA's assistant detachment commander mentioned the Navarian commando team leader, a longtime acquaintance, stated high-level Chinese officials recently visited to discuss large-scale real estate investment. At a local development meeting, the CMSE learned the Chinese purchased land around the southern port city. The PSYOP detachment located advertisements on the local social media outlets signaling Chinese interests in the port area. Recognizing the significance, the cross-functional team transmitted their findings through SOC Africa to the 8th PSYOP Group's Information Warfare Center at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Hey guys, they're not operating in here, by the way. No one is operating in here. They don't do this. As the first Special Forces Commandos US based, this is continental US based information warfare capability, the IWC leveraged the global first SFCA's network to illuminate the threat activity. They rapidly integrated the 389th Intelligence Battalion's all-source intelligence against the Chinese investment in Nauru. Assisted by sophisticated artificial intelligence and machine learning, within 48 hours, the IWC found the original source of the advertisements, a Chinese construction conglomerate active in Nauru over the last 2 years. Okay, I'm getting pronunciation of this. I can't keep mispronouncing it. I can't.
Naravi.
Naravi? Oh, Naravu? Is it just a made-up African country? Like, what is happening? What is this even supposed to be? What is it? What is this supposed to be? I think it is just like a like it's fictional West African country. Okay, so I have no idea how to pronounce it. I'm like, what the fuck is this? The advertisement announced a deep water port that would begin construction in just over a month. Okay, so here's what we've learned. Special operations but soldiers are going around countries, and anytime they see evidence of development or investment, they're working overtime to try to destroy it. You think this is good for Africa? You think this is good for Africa? Oh, they're trying to build a port. Let's destroy the port. It further confirmed the port as a key node in China's Belt and Road Initiative for 2025 and likely naval intentions for 2035. So, in other words, they just made it up. They just made it up. Oh, if China helps this country build a port, that means they'll have a military base there in 20 years. So I guess we'll destroy the port. Even in their fantasy, they're making shit up. The IWC immediately developed an influence campaign to enable JIIM partners to discredit Chinese activities several weeks before the ribbon-cutting ceremony and impede the Chinese from further purchasing land. SOC Africa directed the CFT to monitor and report on Chinese activities. What is JIMM partner? What's that mean? JIMM. Joint Intergovernmental Multinational. Cool. A project to train participants to plan and implement stability operations? What does that mean? What are stability operations, chat? What do you think that means? I'll give you a hint. Stability operations means, how do you disrupt a society so that it collapses into civil war? Nehruvian government cooperation was key in stopping port establishment to inhibit further Chinese expansion. With groundbreaking less than a month away and American diplomats needing more time to persuade the Nehruvian leadership against Chinese investment, South Africa requested assistance from SOJTF-C, working for Fort Bragg, North Carolina. SOJTF-C developed a plan and established Mission Command to converge SOF capabilities on the problem. The problem of building a port in Africa. Stop building ports in Africa. Stop building ports in Africa. They first directed IWC to initiate their previously developed influence campaign. Wait a minute. Influence campaign? Influence campaign? What's this? What's this? I was told the United States just believes in democracy. What's happening here? Influence campaign? They just tell you what they do, guys. Relying on civil economic information provided by the CMSE, the IWC's approach empowered IWTFs in coordination with the JIIM to inflame long-standing friction between Nehruvian workers and Chinese corporations. Within days, protests supported by the CFT's ODA erupted across Chinese business headquarters and their embassy in Ajuba. So this is exactly what they did in Ukraine, by the way. Exactly what they did in Ukraine. To the letter. The Ukrainian president signed a deal with Russia for cheap, low-interest loans and subsidized natural gas to help support poor Ukrainians with home heating during the winter. And then this immediately happened. This is exactly what happened in Ukraine. And that's what led to the so-called Euromaidan, quote, revolution. Simultaneously, the IWC-led social media campaign illuminated the controversy to a global audience. SOJTF.C activated CMSE, who, working with local branches of the Nehruvian government, DOS, USAID, and NGOs, established job fairs near protest areas, providing disaffected workers with alternative employment options. Within 2 weeks, the construction company lost 60% of its required labor pool. With increased scrutiny from the international community and without a workforce, China's port opening was set back by months. The JIIM now had sufficient time to engage with the Nehruvian leadership, communicate the problem, and develop options. 1 week later, Nehruvian security forces discovered an illegal weapons cache. Wait a minute. Oh no. Wow, suddenly there's weapons here. How did we find these weapons? Oh no. Which it traced back to a subsidiary of the construction company. To further investigate the matter, they partnered with 3rd SFG's Hard Target Defeat Company to surveil the construction company's headquarters. Established by the HTD, the Nehruvian security forces accessed the building. While searching it, recovered blueprints for the proposed port facility. Naravu sent the recovered blueprints to DIA and analysts who identified plans for concrete footings specifically designed for CSA-9 surface-to-air DF-25 shore-to-ship missiles. These missiles, if in place in Naravu, would challenge America's air and sea lanes across the Atlantic. Armed with this information, the U.S. ambassador explained if China had placed these weapons at the port, Naravu would become a strategic target and potential war zone between great powers. China's true intent illuminated, the Nehruvian government seized the Chinese-purchased land. This is the fantasy. Though the U.S. thwarted China's expansion of military plans, it was certain China would try to achieve the same goals in the future. Thankfully, Airsoft's forward presence in multiple regions would provide advanced warning of their activities, provide them ample opportunity to disrupt them, and if necessary, set conditions for the U.S. to win in conflict. First to observe, first to influence, first to compete. This is literally a plan to prevent African development. That's it. And this is what your tax dollars are going to in USAID. our strategic value. We are uniquely trained, resourced, and postured to compete on behalf of the nation across the spectrum of conflict. Psychological operations detachment. Civil affairs team. Persuade, change, influence. Secure the victory. This is exactly what we're talking about cutting. And we need to cut all of it. There shouldn't be European Command, Indo-Pacific Command, Central Command, Africa Command, and Southern Command. Abolish it all. And withdraw.
Well, I'm interested in hearing more about it. I've heard press reports. If there's massive fraud, if the funds aren't being directed where the Congress has appropriated and the president has signed, then we need to know about that. So I'm actually in a fact-finding mood.
Do you think
on
that
do
you support that agency in providing foreign aid?
I have felt for a long time that USAID is our way to combat the Belt and Road Initiative, which is China's effort to really gain influence around the world, including Africa and South America and the Western Hemisphere.
Now, notice that the way that Africa was gaining influence was building ports in this country that needed one, right? And the way the U.S. was gaining influence was by manipulating the population to disrupt it. Not building our own port, not building railroads, not helping this country get richer, but by disrupting efforts to develop that country. Why do you think all these West African governments are uniting in the Sahel to push out Western influence? Because they understand that the entire point of Western influence is to keep them poor.
Hemisphere. So we need an aid program to match the Chinese effort, but it needs to be done in a way that the policymakers of the United States have decided ought to be done. And so I'm eager to see an audit and see the sort of mismanagement that the Secretary of State has told us about today.
But they can't just close it without Congress's consent.
Well, I don't know what the emergency powers are, and I'm sure some people are looking into that. Yes.
Are you concerned that Congress didn't get a heads up about this? Are you concerned about?
Well, things are moving very fast in the first 2 weeks of the administration. It is something that I had not been notified about. But again, this is foreign relations and appropriations, and I would not necessarily have been notified. But we're checking. Again, things are happening fast, and we're going to find out a lot more very, very
soon. What about Elon Musk?
There's good communication.
What about Elon Musk gaining access to these treasury payment systems?
That's something that needs to be looked into. Again, I'm hearing something when I wake up this morning, and we've had a full day, and of course I'm listening to press reports, and thank goodness for the First Amendment, and I appreciate what you guys are doing. You're asking the right questions, and we're going to be asking them also.
Do you want
thanks
Congress,
much.
Do you want Congress though to have a role?
Tulsi Gabbard worked with USAID in Africa and did psyops to challenge China and Arab influence. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly true. By the way, I don't trust these conservatives. But honestly, I think they're so incompetent and stupid, they might just cut shit and cut their own dicks off. And I support them cutting their own dicks off.
To play? I mean, if they...
Do I want Congress to exercise its right and power as a co-equal branch of the federal government? Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
And like, this is what our government does. You've probably heard the phrase Green Beret. Do you guys know what a Green Beret is? Like, do you actually know what they are? You've probably heard of like special forces like Delta Force and the Navy SEALs and the Rangers and, you know, pararescue jumpers. And then there's the Green Berets. The Green Berets are America's professional fascism spreaders. The purpose of the Green Berets is to go into countries, build up narco-trafficking rings, and build fascist death squads around them. That is the point of the Green Beret. That's what Green Berets do all day. They go around and they try to prevent countries from establishing independent politics.
Our world is becoming increasingly dangerous as traditional governments are failing and oppressive regimes take their place, spreading chaos and turmoil. Today's warfighter must continue to adapt to unfamiliar environments and technological advancements used by our adversaries in ungoverned areas. It is exactly in these ungoverned areas of the world where Army Special Operations Forces operate and excel, known around the globe as Green Berets. Each Special Forces soldier possesses unique skills and qualifications to maintain a continuous presence overseas, making them the force of choice for any contingency.
A great attribute that Special Forces has is we don't strive for the minimum, we strive for the maximum.
Green Berets are individually selected and specially trained through the Army's most rigorous selection program. The first step required to embark on this journey is to volunteer and then never quit.
Quitting ultimately means mission failure, and then Special Forces mission failure is not an option.
A true quiet professional knows that wearing the Green Beret says more about you than you could ever say about yourself.
Now you got that right.
Enlisted volunteers must complete basic combat training, followed by advanced individual training and airborne school, before they can attend the Special Forces Assessment and Selection, or SFAS. SFAS is also where soldier volunteers from within the Army ranks begin their path to becoming a Green Beret.
My advice to someone that would want to go to SF or try and attend selection would be to really have that never quit mentality and actually prepare very, very hard because it is rigorous.
Completion of SFAS leads to entry into Special Forces Qualification Course, or Q Course. The Q Course consists of 6 phases: orientation, small unit tactics, military occupational specialty, or MOS training, non-conventional warfare, language, and military freefall. For MOS training, officers focus on leadership planning, and NCOs or enlisted volunteers receive specialty training on weapons, engineering, medical, or communications, dependent on soldier aptitude. This training is intense and designed to test the whole person, not just strength or tactical skills, but also intellectual and social skills. Tactical unconventional skills required to coerce, disrupt, or work with a guerrilla force in the overthrow of a hostile government or occupying power are cornerstones of the training.
So that's the point. That's what this is for. The point of this is to create civil wars. That's what the Green Berets do. And one of the things you'll find is wherever there's a really evil death squad of fascist origin, it is 100% always connected to the United States of America and the Green Berets.
Upon completion of the Q course, a soldier will have earned the right to wear the Green Beret. New Green Berets are assigned to an Operational Detachment Alpha, or ODA, which is comprised of 12 soldiers, each with a specific skill and duty.
Special Forces is unique in that we are able to accomplish many tasks with few men.
With a rewarding career path like no other, Special Forces soldiers are also given ample opportunities for advancement and additional training, which includes Halo, Scuba, and other advanced training.
I would consider being SF the professional leagues of the military.
On an ODA, your newly acquired skills are put to the test as you bond with your new team. You will be expected to adapt to any situation, from operating in a denied area as part of a small team to advising diplomats and interagency partners within an embassy. You will work hard, train hard, and depend on each other to accomplish the mission, regardless of where it may take you. Throughout this journey, your
Do you
SF
think
team...
the left has anything like this ready to go? Is there anybody on the left? That's what you need to realize. Like when you're thinking about revolution and shit, do you have a group of guys that could go hard against these guys? No? Then you're playing checkers and they're playing chess.
Teammates will become your second family.
China has it. Yeah, no shit. Why do you think China has it? They learned the hard way. Cuba has it. Why do they have it? They learned the hard way. You know who didn't have it? Iran. You know who didn't have it? Chile. If you play patty cake, they'll shoot you in the forehead.
Creating a timeless, unbreakable bond.
The kind of guys we're looking for is
owned these guys. They're still wobbling from the punch they got from Vietnam.
Guys that are humble, that can put themselves, through hell and back and come back for it and do it for their teammates that are on my left and my right. Our families know each other.
Do it for their teammates. Notice that, like, at the end of the day, it's no longer even about, it's not about, like, the United States or capitalism or whatever. They create these pseudo-familial relationships. And they give these guys impunity. It's just nonsense. There's nothing to, like, they're committing all sorts of crimes, and for what?
We go to our kids' birthday parties. We are one big family.
The need is great for those who can rise to the challenge. We are looking for volunteers who possess courage, integrity, perseverance, and the desire to answer the calling of the soldier elite.
If you want an understanding of where the soldier elite fight, this is a good example. Operation Savannah was the South African code name for their military incursion in Angola in 1975 and 1976. It was part of the South African Border War and arose due to the Angolan War of Independence. The operations also materially influenced the subsequent Angolan Civil War. South African forces, this is apartheid South African forces, invaded deep into Angola with the objective of driving the MPLA, Soviet, and Cuban forces out of southern Angola so as to strengthen the position of the UNITA, the main opponent of the MPLA and an ally of South Africa. Wait a minute. Who's UNITA? UNITA was funded through Angola diamond mines in both Lunda Norte and Lunda Sul along the Kunango River Valley. So they use blood diamonds. Blood diamond guys. South Africa, as well as UNITA and FNLA, had been receiving material and tacit support of the United States as part of their Cold War opposition to the Soviet Union, which emboldened them to pursue this incursion. South African and UNITA fortunes were overturned, and their forces were compelled to withdraw due to MPLA, Cuban, and Soviet pressure. Victory was claimed by the MPLA, who were actively supported by Cuba and the Soviet Union, over the combined forces of UNITA, FNLA, Zaire, and South Africa. For the MPLA, the victory was essential for the proclamation of independence and subsequent political control over Angola. MPLA Cuban victory. The Carnation Revolution, or the 25 April Revolution of 1974 that ended Portugal's colonial government. If you guys don't know what the Carnation Revolution is, Portugal had a fascist government that was allied with the United States. And in 1974, left-wing military officers launched a coup and were joined by the people. So this led to decolonization fights in Africa that the United States opposed with apartheid South Africa. Remember, the United States are the bad guys. Anyway, let's keep going and learning more. Let me see if we can find. Is there any? Do they have any green berets? Let me see if I can find this. I want to get like direct sources. Berets in Operation Savannah. I have to find more. I'm Portuguese. Who should I vote for? Quick, I'm panicking. I don't know, man. I don't know. If you were younger but have the beliefs you have now, would you have considered joining the military? I did. They not only sent soldiers, they sent doctors who were instrumental in the war. With the loss of the Portuguese colonial administration as an ally and the possibility of new regimes sympathetic to SWAPO and Lisbon's former colonies, Pretoria recognized that it would lose a valued cordon sanitaire between Southwest Africa and frontline states. PLAN could seek sanctuary in Angola, and South Africa would be faced with another hostile regime and potentially militarized border to cross in pursuit of Namibian guerrillas. With both the Soviet Union and the United States arming major factions in the Angolan Civil War, the conflict escalated into a major Cold War battleground. South Africa offered advisory and technical assistance to UNITA, while a number of Cuban combat troops entered the country to fight alongside the Marxist MPLA. Moscow also supplied its Angolan clients with heavy weapons. American aid to UNITA and the FNLA was initially undertaken with Operation IA Feature, but this was terminated by the Clark Amendment in October 1976. Aid would not yet return until after the repeal of the Clark Amendment in 1985. Consequently, with the covert assistance of the United States through the CIA, it began assisting UNITA and FNLA in a bid to ensure that neutral or friendly government in Luanda prevailed. South African Prime Minister Balthazar Vorster. This sounds like a demon. Balthazar Vorster? This sounds like a big bad in a D&D campaign. This was like the CIA public relations guy being named fucking Leibold. Balthazar Vorster? The demon of torture? Like, what the fuck? The United States of America being the most evil fucking power in the world is insane. Yeah, Brayton and John Brayton Bach held strongly opposing political viewpoints. You don't say. Trump ordered to dismantle the education department of the works, sources say. Incredible stuff. Honestly, listen here. This is what it looks like when the United States begins to fall. Like, that's really all this is what it looks like. I mean, does anybody think that this will lead to better education in the United States of America? Like, and if you think that, you're insane. You're you are going to, and by the way, I'm not saying American public education is currently operating well. It's absolutely not. But if you think repealing, like 40% of people were just illiterate, period, like completely could not read a word. Like, why did we set up the Department of Education? It's like a question. Like, why did we set that up? What do you think about the 50,501 protesters? A Reddit sub gaining lots of members. Also, Newsweek wrote an article about it yesterday. I think that I wish the protesters well, and I support them. But I think that one of the things that we need to start talking about is moving beyond the era of protest. And what I mean by that is protesting in the street is great, but you have to understand that it's a media play. It's for attention. It's for media attention. And at a certain point, you're not really engaging with politics in a serious way by just holding up a sign. I think a lot of people think protests have always existed, and the answer is they haven't. Protests rose with mass media. Prior to mass media, do you know what people would do? They would do revolts. Instead of a bunch of people getting together and holding signs and shaking them in the town square, what they would do is they would go and they would grab the officials in their charge of the region they're in, and they would hold them hostage. And they would make demands. And they would prepare military forces. Protesting is something that was invented basically with the newspapers. There were riots, but holding your little placard like this, that's a pretty recent invention. And like and like radio, it's kind of going out of fashion.
To fancy dinners in Paris. If only Joni Ernst could find someone who is maybe a senator, one of 100 most powerful people in the country, who is in the majority in the Senate and could hold a hearing on it and shut the whole thing down. But apparently she doesn't know who to ask about that. Go ahead.
Support somebody's fancy dinner to
100%.
entertain whoever. Yeah.
Exactly. So, to be clear, in shutting down, which we're in the process of doing, shutting down USAID, the reason for that, as opposed to simply, trying to do some minor house cleaning, is that as we dug into USAID, it became apparent that what we have here is not an apple with a worm in it, but we have actually just a bowl of worms. And so at the point at which you don't merely, like, if you've got an apple and it's got a worm in it, maybe you can take the worm out. But if you've got actually just a bowl of worms, it's hopeless. And USAID is a bowl of worms. Mm-hmm. There is no apple. And when there is no apple, you've just got to basically get rid of the whole thing. That is why it's got to go. You know, it's beyond repair. So. Yeah.
Well, there's a solution to this, which is that, let's say something's cut that the people of this country just demand.
Pause it. Now, wait a second. This is Vivek Ramaswamy. And
all I could say is, like, if you're an American and you're listening to this and going like, oh, but what about this amazing program? You know, you're trapped in, unfortunately, an old paradigm. You're trapped in an old paradigm, and that paradigm is, I'm gonna play World War I era, warfare tactics. Elon Musk and Donald Trump, they've broken through the Ardennes. You know, that's the reality. The Maginot Line has been bypassed. You know, you should be going to Dunkirk. You're in La La Land, where you think like, oh, let's litigate USAID. You need to be figuring out how to protect Social Security. And this was always going to happen. As I said for the longest time, the analogy of the Ardennes forest. I said they could come right through here and God knows what's going to happen. And the liberals are already trying to collaborate. So at the end of the day, this is the end of the American empire. This is the period of fire sale. This is where the fascists and the wealthy are trying to pick apart the corpse.
He says, he's gonna go on to talk about the solution on how the American public can get it back, but there is absolutely zero authority for the president of the United States, and certainly his top oligarch, to just unilaterally decide they're going to cut an agency. All of the authority, if you can believe it, actually lies in people like Joni Ernst and Mike Lee on this call, based upon something called the Constitution. And here's Vivek Ramaswamy's idea on how we can get this back, but it's just so blinkered that he doesn't realize that he's actually talking about why what Musk is doing is thoroughly illegal.
Let's say something's cut that the people of this country just demand needs to exist again. It can always be voted back into existence by Senator Ernst and her colleagues.
100%.
And
totally.
The fact that that isn't going to happen reveals exactly why many of these agencies, really deletion is the only answer that's left.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Well said.
Pause it right there. Now, why would you need Joni Ernst and Mike Lee to vote it back in? Is it because the authority to create agencies does not lie with the president? Why couldn't the president just reinstate it? Why couldn't Elon Musk decide that we're going to have a new agency? for the exact same reason why it's illicit for them to cut it.
He's going, I triple dog dare you, Joni Ernst, up for re-election in 2026 to go against my authority. If the will of the American people is that we need more USAID back, well, Joni Ernst, she can just vote for it, but I've got a cool, few dozen mil that I can just pour right into her race as she's on this call with me. That would preclude her from doing that. That's
certainly why she voted for Pete Hegseth.
And that's why she's on that call right now.
But the point is that if you need the authority of the U.S. Senate to create an agency, you need the authority of the U.S. Senate to dissolve that agency.
Exactly.
And I guess we'll see if somebody brings a legal challenge. It seems to me like Congress would have the standing. I don't know, but. Don't worry, Chuck Schumer is on the case. And wait, do you have that AP thing?
I don't.
You didn't find it? Okay.
I don't know if this is the right
so I'm listening to AP this morning. Yeah.
Is it the AP?
Yes.
I think it's this one.
Yeah.
See what you try here.
There's going to be commercials on this.
AP News. Good morning, I'm Ed Donahue. A USAID agency is on the cusp of being shut down. The AP's Julie Walker has the story.
The U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, which is in charge of dispensing billions of dollars in foreign aid, is on the cusp of being shut down, according to President Trump's advisor, Elon Musk. Asked about it.
What? What? No, wait, keep playing this because here's the point. Why what Schumer is doing is so stupid and ineffective.
Back to the White House Sunday, Trump weighed in.
USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision.
Musk has been wrestling for control of USAID and took to X Spaces to discuss it.
To be clear, in shutting down which we're in the process of doing, shutting down USAID.
The Trump administration placed 2 top USAID security chiefs on leave after they refused to turn over classified material to Musk's Doge government inspection teams, which did eventually get control. I'm Julie Walker.
Tomorrow,
okay, so there it is. Absolutely no sense of what they're doing is completely illicit. No sense of this is unprecedented. And where's the Democrat who is going to come out and say, hey, this is completely unprecedented and illicit?
I mean,
because Chuck Schumer has decided the best way to do this is to let them, they're going to screw up.
Hakeem Jeffries, this came out this morning, is going to use this in their negotiations on the budget, as opposed to raising the alarms because he's going to make a demand that this freeze stop. But that's a few months down the line here, buddy. We're in a 5-alarm fire. Like, there's a lot of, I saw AOC made this thing where she called it a plutocratic coup. I guess it was probably in reference to the Treasury, but it still is the overall same dynamic where it's the...
I mean, like, a couple things here. Like, I hate the American Constitution. It is intentionally designed to be anti-democratic. It's intentionally designed to make it so that you can't actually achieve reforms. And it's almost entirely set up to stymie and destroy any kind of left-wing organization or movement, both here and abroad. And the only reason why America is a world power, and this is a fact, is because a few times in our history, a president violated the Constitution and enacted necessary reforms, notwithstanding the processes that were in place. And because they were so popular politically, they were able to basically revalue how we interpret the Constitution ex post facto to align with what they did. And the very clear examples of this are Abraham Lincoln and FDR. Abraham Lincoln and FDR violated the Constitution in order to enact necessary reforms into the American government. The whole idea of the administrative state itself is not consistent with the Constitution. However, legal realism is the fact, which is people rationalize things they need through spurious interpretation that then becomes the stare decisis norm. And so America has had these periods of punctuated equilibria where problems in American society get to such an extent that the excessive veto points of the Constitution have to be overawed. And that is what has happened. Now, Barack Obama had that opportunity. Barack Obama had the opportunity to do necessary reforms. He did. He had the 60 senators. He had the massive popular support. There was a huge economic recession and crisis justifying his actions. And Barack Obama bunkered down, protected the status quo, protected Wall Street, diffused that left-wing energy, and channeled it into Donald Trump twice. That is Barack Obama. And so now we're in this period of where the crises have continued to escalate to the point that they can't be ignored anymore. And because there is no left-wing path, the left-wing path to do reforms has been blocked effectively by the Democratic Party and Barack Obama. The only path around the obstruction is to the right, and they're going to go around the obstructions to the right, and they're going to do unbelievable damage. And they're going to make things worse off than before. Imagine a dam, right? Imagine this huge dam holding a reservoir of water. And the choices are let the dam get washed get overtopped and destroyed and then destroy everything downstream. That's the Trump option. Or the build a hydroelectric diversion spillway. That was the Bernie option. Well, we assassinated the guy with the spillway plan. And now the only plan that's happening is the overtop the dam and destroy the downriver communities. And that's where we're at.
The richest man on the planet is being given access without congressional oversight to our most sensitive government functioning and taking a hatchet to it because it's this like idea that they can create a series of shocks. This is the shock doctrine in practice, so that these plutocrats can just create these like mass austerity measures and cut. And then in the wreckage, they can rebuild this government in their image and take as many of the spoils as they want. That's the agenda. And it's also mixed. So it's the tech agenda and this Curtis Yarvin monarchical might makes right, democracy is outdated vision. That's kind of this Frankenstein that we have here.
Why have Congress at all?
Well, that's what they're trying to do.
Why haven't voted on anything?
It's the Supreme Court empowering itself with the Chevron doctrine, or doing away with it, so that they have complete control over what should be the agency authority on that end. And then on the presidential end, they have given Trump broad powers with his like presidential immunity for official acts. And he's testing it again, where they're probably going to try to take the impoundment control thing to the Supreme Court. This is both like a two-pronged diminishment of congressional power. They've already Good. The Senate is dog shit. And I told you this would happen. I told everybody here. I said when Joe Biden had a trifecta, I said we need to pass a whole bunch of things quickly to fix the structural problems in this country to give democracy a chance. I said admit DC and Puerto Rico as a state. I said ban political gerrymandering. I said reform the Supreme Court. I was there January 20. Let's see what I said January 21st, 2021. Like, this is, if you want to understand how I knew this would happen. And I said it was going to happen.
Countering Chinese influence inside.
Years ago. Here's all you have to do. Go over here. Go Mike from PA. We'll just go ahead and just search let's say January 20th, 2021 to January 22nd, 2021, and we'll see if my analysis is any good. So now we enter the period where we laid our demands against the Democratic Party. Smart leftists will be looking for structural changes that enhance our power for the long term. That means pro-union labor reform, DC statehood, HR 1, which bans gerrymandering, $15 minimum wage, and more. We got 0 of those things. 0. If you are one of those people saying this is the most progressive administration in history, it's time to stop. We are no longer in campaign mode. Now is the time for results. AOC out there standing with the Teamsters on the picket line is the type of action we need now. Except they kept saying that. They still say it. I think this may be the signal that we need to get rid of the filibuster. And they did none of that. They did none of that. Why don't they admit DC as a state? It's a guaranteed 2 Democratic senators. It's a guaranteed another member of Congress. Why wouldn't they do that? Why wouldn't you just say there's 750,000 people in DC? That would make it the 48th largest state by population. Bam, admitted as a state. If it was 98% Republican, it would have been a state in 1980. We're not going to go after every single issue, Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, the minority lead, said in an interview. We're picking the most important fights and lying down on the train tracks on those fights. Schumer's fantasy scenario is not one where he and Dem win. It's one where they die. That's my fantasy, too. Do you think you could talk about the death drive in capitalism for chat? Oh, yeah. I mean, it is what it is. It's not just in capitalism. It's in humanity in general. And like, this is the point that like, the reason why I showed you guys this tweet. Like, this is why I showed you this tweet, because when Joe Biden stepped into office, this is the way I was thinking. How come none of this is, the Democratic Party doesn't do any of this? This would substantially have improved Democratic Party power long term, and they don't do it. It's because they don't want to have long term power. It's literally just that simple.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org.
Diminished it with, like, frankly, the Senate and the filibuster and everything, right? But they're even diminishing it more, the courts are, with the help of the conservative apparatus. So it's more power to the executive and more power to these right-wing judges.
And the idea that the Democrats are sitting on the sideline and not creating a political narrative about this, when you have the AP running to normies, essentially like, this is, oh, here. I mean, it comes off as like Elon Musk is just going in there and rooting out inefficiencies just like, one would hope.
I heard
which is
more
just
outrage from these institutions over the idea that someone would overrule the parliamentarian. What happened to all of this care about our procedures and processes? It's completely insane how we're rolling over.
Hakeem Jeffries was doing an APAC fundraiser talking about Sinwar being gone over the weekend. Like, join DSA.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.
And like, here's the thing. The reason why we're in this mess, and I mean this literally, the reason why we're in this mess is because leftists lack confidence. Like, and that's literally the case. People like Sam Cedar and a lot of other leftists just don't believe we can win. Like, and I think it has to do with like being hurt in the past and just trying to avoid pain. It's like a person who has a painful breakup and then they never date again because like they don't want to be hurt again. And it's like, you need to give up, grow up. Life has setbacks. Life had failures. There's no guarantee that you're going to succeed or you're going to find love. But you're definitely not going to succeed, and you're definitely not going to find love if you don't try. And so many leftists are afraid to try. They want to do what's comfortable. They want to take the path of least resistance. They want to stay competing in the Democratic Party sandbox. They want to do the same scheduled protests with filed police paths, with parades. Like, this is the type of performative politics that they want to engage in. And voting as like some sort of end all be all. Like, that is the performative politics that we're in. And it's a shocking reality.
Vermont warned the order is a dangerous move towards authoritarianism, writing, "If President Trump wants to change our nation's laws, he has the right to ask Congress to change them. He does not have the right to violate the United States Constitution. He is not."
A YouTuber I watched named Lil Bill said most leftists give up early because they know it will take more than their lifetime to see the dream of reality, which is why I have to say, if that's you, you're an egomaniac bitch. Number one. Number two, you have no fucking idea what is politically plausible. You have no fucking idea what is politically plausible. That's why there's a famous Lenin quote. Some weeks, decades happen, or some decades, weeks happen, and some weeks, decades happen. We have absolutely no idea what is going to happen. We have no idea what is politically plausible. 2 years before the Soviet Union fell, nobody was predicting the Soviet Union is about to fall. Similarly, nobody knows when the United States is going to fall. Nobody knows shit. All you could do is do what you think is right and advocate and fight for that better world. Stop worrying about constantly demanding success be certain before you engage in an activity. If you engage only in activities where success is certain, you will never grow. The analogy that I want you to understand, it's like working out and growing muscle. You don't grow muscle just by lifting light weight. You grow muscle by lifting heavy weight, by taking your muscle to failure, and then regrouping, eating clean, healing up, and the muscle grows back bigger. And then the next time you try to move that heavy weight, you might move it. And then over the course of decades, or the course of years, what used to be an impossible weight becomes easy to move. That's how you have to think about politics. Stop expecting everything to just fall down like an avalanche the moment you apply the slightest amount of pressure. Achieving change is like moving a mountain with a shovel. It's not It's not an avalanche being changed by a butterfly's wings, okay? It is about hard, dirty work, shovelful by shovelful. But if you keep at it, you will move mountains. The other thing to keep in mind is if you're just a single person doing your own thing, you're never going to move that shit. But if you organize a community, if you organize a collective, a city, properly organized and properly mobilized, can move a mountain with nothing but shovels. That is the reality. And so, yeah.
Not a king. Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, joins me now. Senator, you know, it's striking to me that members of your august body, who say whatever you want about them, generally like their own power, would willingly move to confirm a man in Russell Vought who's before the Budget Committee to head OMB when it is the position of that individual that the president has every right to completely bypass the Senate and the Budget Committee on matters of spending. What do you think is going to happen here?
I think everything being equal, Vought is going to win. I suspect virtually all Democrats will vote against him. I think all Republicans will vote for him. You know, what Raphael Warnock was just talking about a moment ago about the devastating cuts to programs that working families, low-income people need is absolutely correct. And I'm glad that we fought back and, for the moment at least, we have managed to get that freeze rescinded. But the key point here is that what Trump did is illegal and unconstitutional. The power of the purse rests with Congress, your point, and not with the executive. You know, the founding fathers were pretty smart about that. They divided up the power. But I'll tell you something, when you talk about authoritarianism, Chris, it is not only Vought and the power of the OMB and what Trump is doing, it is also, I'm sure you have noticed, his lawsuits.
Here's what Little Bill said in full. If y'all know me, you know I'm very critical of online-only leftism, but I hate this argument for a reason. For what argument? The one, and I think the biggest advantage the right has over the left. The content creators and prominent people are on are idealist only, while on the right, they are executioners. The right use their platforms to go on to city tours, organizing meetups and networking events. While on the left, it just tells you to organize locally or volunteer at your local soup kitchen. The reason why the right is able to do these meetups and networking events is because they have hundreds of millions of dollars behind them. Do you think Charlie Kirk is making phone calls and setting up the fucking convention? Are you fucking stupid? They have they have 100 paid organizations coming from billionaires. For the sake of simplicity, let's define leftism as any ideology that espouses anti-capitalism in some form. It's only been in the last decade-ish that it's gained any kind of traction in the US to the point of having AOCs and such gain a platform off of it. Remember, Bernie was essentially nobody until a little after Occupy. I mean, he wasn't. He was a leader in Vermont, but he didn't have national recognition. I don't think a senator, or from Vermont is a nobody, but okay. Meanwhile, American conservative has basically been this since the 70s. First, no, again, you don't understand. It actually, the conservative movement can really be traced to the Barry Goldwater. What we call the conservative movement can be traced to Barry Goldwater. So right off the bat, it's not the 70s. So that's wrong. It's the 60s. But it started to see success in the 70s. First it was busing, then it was just say no, then it was the religious right, then it was war on crime. Every single one of those things. Okay, I probably can't go through this because the factual errors are going to get to me. First of all, the sequence of this is all wrong. Never mind. We're going to be nice. We're moving on. Then it was never forget, then the Tea Party, then the birtherism movement. Y'all see where this is going. But a lot of y'all, actually, I think birtherism was before the Tea Party. The Tea Party was after Barack Obama won. The birtherism movement began before he won. But a lot of y'all, and by I mean all y'all, I mean white people and respectables, didn't notice until they dropped the dog whistles. But they've building a network of bigotry for about 5 decades. 5 decades? I think one of the things about that's interesting about history is that when people talk about history, they tend to go right up to the point where they are really knowledgeable. I'm going to say that I think they've been building power in the United States off of bigotry for a lot longer than 5 decades. I'm going to go ahead and throw that out as a hypothesis. All politics is local. So this is one of the things that, so basically my reaction to this is I completely disagree. All politics is international. Local politics has largely been destroyed because people no longer engage in local organizations and institutions. Church attendance is low and declining. Religiosity is down. Participation in local civics groups is down. People are not part of the Shiners. They're not part of the Elks Club. They're not part of the Masons. They're not, they're not at their local Polish club. They're not at their local Puerto Rican Benevolent Society. Like all that shit, local newspapers are not read. People are not Rotarians. Like all of that is going away. Like local politics is dying. Everybody sounds the same. They're off the same national and international scripts. This is factual. If you try to go out there and say politics is local, you're gonna get fucking owned. When people run for dog catcher, they're asking them what they think about deportations. And the right wing is the party that has understood this for a long time. It is the right wing that has been trying to nationalize every race because they understand that politics is national now. That's why everybody, when they run for Congress, they get, what happens to them? They're in a commercial where they're standing next to Nancy Pelosi. Why is every commercial of a person running for office a picture of them with Nancy Pelosi? Because Nancy Pelosi has a 30% approval rating nationwide. Nobody likes Nancy Pelosi except the most dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. So all politics is international now. That's why all the fascists are, allying. That's why they're all standing next to Trump and they're all doing Trumpian style content. Whether it's the South Korean incel guy, whether it's Argentina, whether it's El Salvador, this is just completely wrong. This is not 1955 anymore. It's 2025. People are not going to union halls anymore. Like, this is just wrong. I just completely 100,000 quadrillion% disagree. How do I know? Because I actually do that. I go to the union halls. You know who's in the union halls? Retirees that retired 15 years ago. There's a few exceptions. But, like, that's the reality. Nixon's influence on the ballot diminished the further down you went because the GOP had no infrastructure in the South until Reagan. Reason being, the South didn't become a red until the Democrats made civil rights part of their platform. Goldwater was actually pretty progressive. Well, okay. I don't know Little Bill, so I'm going to go ahead and close it. I'm going to go ahead and close it. I'm sure he's a nice guy.
Against the media when they do things that he's not happy with. So you got a suit against ABC. You got a suit against the Des Moines Register. You got Meta apparently gave him $25 million today. So what goes on? If you say something tomorrow that Trump doesn't like, maybe he will sue NBC. And maybe
I mean, there's so many factual errors in that comment. Like, I don't even know where to begin. The idea that Goldwater was progressive is one of the most funny things I've ever heard in my entire fucking life. Guys, Goldwater was very progressive. That's why he did the best in that's why Goldwater did the best in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and Arizona, because those are famously progressive states, and they really, really, really liked Goldwater's his very progressive policies.
Maybe your bosses will say, hey, Chris, you got to calm it down a little bit. We can't afford 50.
MLK called him Hitler. How Barry Goldwater brought the far right to the center stage in the 1964 presidential race. When
Sunny day.
The far right senator, Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater, ran for the American presidency in 1964, he never pretended to woo voters in the political center. Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, declared Goldwater in his speech accepting the Republican National Party's nomination at its 1964 convention. And moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. That fall, incumbent Democrat Lyndon B. Johnson crushed Goldwater in a historic landslide, carrying more than 60% of the vote. Goldwater won only his home state and 5 deep South states that long leaned Democratic but were struggling with the party's actions supporting civil rights. Democratic distractors like Martin Luther King Jr. and then California Governor Pat Brown had compared his blunt, pull-no-punches rhetoric to Hitler. Within his own party, moderates responded with varying degrees of dismay or horror to his policies. On the eve of the 1964 GOP convention, the Republican governor of Pennsylvania, William Scranton, publicly released a letter he had written to Goldwater decrying the latter's crazy quilt of dangerous position, including his casual attitude toward the use of nuclear weapons. But while his own bid for the White House flamed out, the embers of Goldwater's political philosophy, championing small government and individual freedoms, would ignite the party's conservative wing for decades to come. During the election, he voted against the landmark 1964 Civil Rights Act, arguing some of its provisions impinged on individual freedoms. His fans laughed it up, even as when Goldwater's plain-spokenness sometimes went too far. One Georgia supporter offered the candidate a taste of the beverage he had concocted and was selling from the back of his truck. Goldwater, for the right drink for the conservative taste. The man of the hour was underwhelmed. This tastes like piss, he said, spitting it out. That is an anecdote right there. Okay, I was like kind of not respecting the article's writing until that. That was funny. Good one. Many historians trace the ascendance of far-right candidates and groups with the GOP with Goldwater's failed but memorable campaign. The idea that Goldwater is any kind of progressive is just nonsense. And it is whitewashing by libertarian freaks.
$50 million.
I don't know what he was saying.
So this is a real movement toward authoritarianism. And when you add on top of that the movement toward oligarchy, 3 richest guys in America standing beside Trump at his inauguration, we got a lot of problems facing our country right now.
I just want to note, since you brought it up, one thing that has been amazing to me is all of the encouragement we've gotten from the folks here that run this news organization, that we're going to do what we do under the First Amendment, fairly and precisely, with neither fear or favor. And I'm confident in that. I really am. And I think your point about the suing is wild. I want to actually stay on that for one moment. I don't think we've ever seen president as plaintiff before. It's a very bizarre situation that I don't think everyone's gotten their head around. Right. There's a bunch of Supreme Court precedent about whether the president can be sued. But the idea of the president doing the suing and other people paying him settlements, that seems kind of odd.
Oh, it's not odd. It is extraordinarily dangerous. That is, if that's not undermining the First Amendment, I don't know what is. Right. So if you think that, people in media are not going to be looking over their shoulders, worrying about a lawsuit from Donald Trump, you are mistaken. So we are in a dangerous situation. We are in an unprecedented situation. But here's what I want to say to listeners who are justifiably very worried. Do not forget that while Republicans control the House and the Senate, their margins are slim. All right, they don't have 60 votes in the Senate. They got, a 4-vote majority in the House. That ain't a lot of votes. And a number of Republicans won by a small margin in Democratic districts. They are susceptible to citizen outrage. So get on the phone. If you see these guys doing something like wanting to give huge tax breaks to billionaires while they cut Medicare, if they want to go drill, baby, drill while we have been facing an existential threat of climate change, if they want to deport 20 million people in this country, stand up, fight back. We can beat them. So let's not act in a hopeless way. Oh, my God, we can't do anything. We can. Longer term, obviously, we need to do what the Democratic Party has not done, has become the party of the working class, develop a strong grassroots movement with labor unions, with young people, with people of color, and organize and fight back. The progressive agenda, and I say this over and over again, is the people's agenda. It is wildly popular. People understand the current healthcare system is broken. They want universal healthcare. Healthcare is a human right. They want to raise the starvation minimum wage
can I ask you about healthcare?
To a living wage. Yeah.
I mean, you've got, and it connects to your first point, which is that it's not like all this is a fait accompli. Robert Kennedy Jr., who you interviewed and you asked him about those onesies, which was an instantly iconic moment. I'm not going to play it now because I want to get your answer here. I don't think it's a sure thing that he's going to be confirmed. And I thought the concerns from some Republicans were quite persuasive, including Senator Cassidy, who used to be a doctor. What do you think?
Well, I sit next to Senator Cassidy. He was the ranking member, and I was the chair. Now I'm the ranking member. He's the chair. He is a doctor, and he's nobody's fool. He is concerned about Kennedy's absurd attacks and lies about vaccines and autism, and we will see what happens. What we should appreciate is there'll be an enormous amount of pressure on Cassidy, on other Republicans, but his line of questioning was, I think, very commendable.
Yeah, Senator Bernie Sanders, who asked Kennedy if he could just say whether vaccines and autism were linked, wouldn't answer his question. Thank you so much, Senator. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris.
Chat. Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Okay, let's keep going. AOC is so cringe, man. AOC is legitimately cringe. I don't know what else what to say. I don't know what else to say. AOC is cringe.
At the request of Nancy Mace, get ready with me while I explain to you how USAID actually prevents terrorism, starting with eyeliner. I actually looked at violent extremism and things that create it when I worked at the State Department. And here's what we know. In communities where there aren't opportunities to make a livelihood and support your family, those are the areas that you see an increase in violent extremism, because those are the kind of conditions that allow violent extremist groups to come in and say...
So, like, what off the bat, I would say that this Sarah Jacobs person is probably an enemy of mine. And kind of like in kind of a fundamental sense, right? Because this is just baby shit for baby brains. And this is just a sociopathic manipulation for people that are well-meaning idiots. We showed you earlier in the stream a PDF from Special Forces where they specifically talked about strategies to prevent the investment of a port facility out of manufactured ideas of China creating a military base 20 years in the future, right? And this is just the idea of, like, why do you think these communities can't continue with their livelihoods? Because when they try to build infrastructure or port facilities or railroads or electric grids, or they try to have their own oil and natural resources owned nationally and sold for the benefit of the nation, as opposed to foreign mineral extraction corporations, they have people like Sarah Jacobs show up to start a civil war.
That they can actually make your life better if you just work with them. So the kind of work that USAID does, creating economic development in these communities to actually be able to provide services to people to make them feel like they're part of a government and part of a state.
Feel like. Not you are, but feel like.
This is exactly the work that USAID does, and exactly the most effective thing that we can be doing to prevent violent extremism and terrorism. If you're a young person who feels like there's no way to get ahead, there's no opportunity for you, the government doesn't care about you, and because you're a certain ethnic identity, you are discriminated against. And then a group comes in and tells you, we can fix all your problems. We will take care of your community. We'll take care of your family. We'll give you a sense of purpose and something bigger than yourself, and we'll pay you so that your family can live. That's exactly how people get recruited into these violent extremist groups and what creates more terrorism. When someone knows that as a kid they were saved by life-saving medicine provided by USAID and the American people, or if a mother knows that her kid was saved by this kind of life-saving work, that mother, that kid, when they grow up, they're not going to want to do things to attack the United States. They're going to be grateful to the United States. USAID also helps protect against diseases from spreading so that they don't come to the United States.
Well, this isn't true. The United States, for example, we set up a fake polio vaccination program in Pakistan to try to collect DNA from children to try to find relatives of Osama bin Laden. And we abused a polio vaccination campaign. And it was exposed as being a DNA collection site for the CIA. How do you think that is affecting the administration of polio vaccines in that region?
get people here sick. That's why JFK created USAID during the Cold War, not out of the goodness of his heart, but because the work that USAID does is an important part of U.S. national security and keeping Americans safe.
So in other words, it is in fact CIA front. Like, I legitimately don't know what else to say. This is a Democrat. This is a Democrat. USAID spread vaccine disinfo on the Philippines to counter Sinovac, leading to insanely heightened anti-vax sentiment. Yeah, that's true. I can't speak. I need a moment of silence.
We can't make our boxes in China because Yao has threatened every manufacturer in the country.
That's right.
We can't afford Bangladesh because the workers have unionized.
Sadly, correct.
And we can't use our place in Laos because one person gets her scalp ripped off and suddenly everyone's screaming regulations.
Yes.
You know, you hear a lot of chatter about the growth of the global economy, but no one wants to talk about the downside.
Gavin, there is one other manufacturing option we haven't discussed yet, which, considering the current circumstances, might be worth consideration.
I'm open to anything.
America.
Fuck you.
I feel the same way. But we were recently contacted by the mayor of Goldbriar, North Carolina.
They had a DVR manufacturing plant that closed. The retooling would be minimal.
They've got a skilled labor pool just sitting idle, and they sound desperate.
Really? How desperate?
It was pitiful.
Really?
I think a lot of people are in their own mind palaces a lot of time. I think there's a lot of mind palaces. People think that the Democratic Party is like close to doing and it's like so far away from reality. Like, not like big things. I'm not talking about big things. I'm talking about small things. New Zoran numbers. Now that we have name rec numbers from the Honan poll, we could determine what % of voters who have heard of a candidate support them. Zoran, 26% of the people that have heard of him support him. That's pretty damn good. To be fair, it's the only Democratic primary voters, but that's still really bad given how many dinos are on the rolls. That's awesome. Eric Adams at 9%. That's pretty great.
I'm Amy Goodman. The top-ranking career U.S. Treasury Department official, David LeBruck, has been forced out of the agency after he resisted a demand by Elon Musk and his associates at Doge to gain access to the government's vast payment system, which disperses trillions of dollars in federal payments each year. Trump's new Treasury Secretary, the billionaire Scott Bessent, ended up giving Musk access to the system, which includes sensitive information about taxpayers, Social Security recipients, government contractors, including Musk's rivals. Musk is also accused of waging a takeover at the Office of Personnel Management, where career civil servants have been locked out of computer systems. For more, we're joined by two guests. Waleed Shahid is Democratic strategist. His new piece on Substack is headlined, "Elon Musk is staging a coup." Waleed was previously the spokesperson for Justice Democrats and former senior advisor for the campaigns of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jamal Bowman. We're also joined in Washington, D.C. by Lindsay Owens, executive director of the Groundwork Collaborative, who says there are several reasons Musk wants to control Treasury payments. None of them are good. Okay. Waleed Shahid, let's begin with you. What do you mean that Elon Musk is staging a coup?
So if this story was taking place somewhere in Central Asia or in Africa, the United States media, the United States State Department, international institutions would likely refer to this as a coup. A billionaire industrialist who donated $300 million to a campaign is installing his personal loyalists in key parts of the federal bureaucracy. This is essentially Viktor Orban's playbook. And we need to know, why does a billionaire industrialist with millions in government contracts, military contracts for his private companies, need the Social Security numbers of every American, needs to know what every single check that the U.S. government gives out to businesses, to charities? Why does this billionaire need to know this information? He was not vetted or approved by the U.S. Senate. He has a history of corruption for using public resources for private gain. He's one of the wealthiest men in the world, and in any other situation, this would be called state capture, and people around the world would be condemning it. But in the United States, we are not used to this kind of level of creeping authoritarianism, of plutocracy, of oligarchy so explicit. And we need to, this is as Representative Ocasio-Cortez said last night, this is a 5-alarm fire. Senate Democrats need to be communicating to the American people. And last night there was a call by Indivisible Action for people to visit their senators and call for them to grind the Senate to a halt, to call for investigations, and to know, why does Elon Musk need to know this information? Why is he showing up on Saturday to the offices of the federal government demanding the private information of citizens all around the country?
Well, Lindsay Owens, you say none of the reasons are good. Lay those out.
Yeah, absolutely. So for most Americans, this is the first time that they've ever heard of the Treasury payment system. So what is the Treasury payment system? This is effectively the piece of the federal government that cuts the checks. And they cut a lot of checks. This is $6 trillion a year. Money that goes to individuals as Social Security payments for seniors, money that goes for organizations like Meals on Wheels to deliver lunches, foreign aid, as well as the funding that the government sets aside for key programs, paying its debts, making sure that we don't breach the debt ceiling and default on our obligations. So this is really unprecedented that Elon Musk has grabbed control of the keys of $6 trillion in payments infrastructure. There are a few reasons this could be happening. The first is, as your viewers know, Last week, President Trump tried to end federal spending, just stop federal payments altogether. This was so outrageous and in violation of the Constitution that the courts intervened and said that he couldn't do that. What may be happening here is that Musk may be doing an end run around the courts, going straight to the source so that he can continue to stop those payments that the courts said needed to keep staying online. The second thing that may be happening here is this could just be a good old-fashioned cyber attack. Elon Musk could be interested in the Social Security numbers, the tax ID numbers of tens of millions of Americans. We know that he has partnered with Visa and is considering spinning out a payment system of his own. What we may have here is Elon Musk's attempt to get the private information for his own financial gain. The other thing that is incredibly worrying here is $6 trillion in spending is not just a lot of money, it's a macroeconomically significant amount of money. If Elon Musk starts tinkering with the code, the underlying technology that makes sure these payments go out seamlessly and effectively, he could inadvertently or on purpose bring the macroeconomy to a halt. I mean, this is an incredibly concerning seizure of government infrastructure, but it is also an economically significant moment in the country. So I couldn't agree with Waleed more. I mean, the word coup is the right word to be thinking about here, and Congress must intervene. I mean, if I was a senator, I think the most important thing to do is bring the Secretary of the Treasury to the Senate today to answer questions about what Musk has access to.
So the Treasury Department's Inspector General, who could monitor Doge's activities, was among the 15 watchdogs who were purged by President Trump. Who's now in charge of or overseeing Musk's team?
Yeah, Musk is in charge. So that's exactly right. Some of the key chokeholds here to make sure that something like this doesn't happen have been moved out of the way.
Groundwork collaborative. That feels like sounds like something funded by Langley, honestly.
Studiously, exactingly moved out of the way. So President Trump fired.
I mean, she seems like a good person overall. You know, I don't want to go too off the rails. Lindsay seems like a good person. Looking into her more, you know. But I'll be quite honest with you, chat. There's a lot of people that are addicted to American empire, who think of themselves as left wing.
The Inspector General of the Treasury and the top civil servant of the Treasury Department, the man who was the acting Treasury Secretary between the time that Janet Yellen stepped down and Scott Bessent was confirmed by the Senate, has also been pushed aside, resigned over the fact that he didn't want to give Musk, a private citizen, a billionaire, the keys to the Treasury payment system. So there is very little stopping Musk from taking this over. Trump and Bessent have really, given him a glide path.
So, Waleed Shahid, where is the Democratic Party on this? Where are the Democratic senators and Congress members on this? I mean, you have Hakeem Jeffries, who holds an emergency meeting of the Democrats after a judge stops the federal payments from going out to, stops the ban on federal funding.
So the Democratic Party in Washington is largely asleep at the wheel. They are acting as if they're kind of a librarian shushing noise in a crowded room. They're still believing in the normal procedures, normal decorum, normal that everything here is the normal transition of power. And they still believe that what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing is just a libertarian reform of the government, not an oligarchic, plutocratic takeover of a private billionaire who is seeking to know, potentially seeking to know what his competitors might be doing with government contracts. He has private information that Elon Musk has contracts with international governments all across the world. But the Democratic Party is not able to put forward an opposition message right now because they feel like this is normal. And that's why it's so important for concerned citizens all across the country to twist the arm of your Senate Democrat. Go to their office. If you go to indivisible.org today, you can find a way to join your local chapter. And all around the country, whether your senator is a Republican or a Democrat or independent, they need to hear from concerned citizens because the Democratic Party doesn't move on issues of oligarchy, of plutocracy, of taking action.
Because they are a plutocratic, oligarchic party.
Unless their constituents show up in person and demand that they hold hearings, take the bully pulpit in the media, and also grind the Senate to a halt until we know why does Elon Musk have this information, someone who is not elected.
So the Democratic National Committee on Saturday elected the moderate political insider Ken Martin as chair, despite calls from voters to urgently switch gears and respond to working people's needs following the party's crushing defeat, though it wasn't a major numbers defeat, but it was a defeat in November. What do you think of Ken Martin? Where do you think it's going?
So the DNC is largely at this point a fundraising vehicle for the presidential campaign. I hope that Ken Martin reforms the party to do things like what I'm describing. The Democratic Party should be holding daily press conferences every morning to explain to working class and middle class Americans why it might hurt their pocketbooks for Elon Musk to have this information from the Treasury Department and from the OPM. That Elon Musk has a history of wanting to use public resources for private gain, that Elon Musk is someone who is live tweeting that he wants to cut.
I've often talked about how there's two factions of capital. There's two factions of capital in regards to politics, right? There is this kind of like the Bircher right. So these are like the Mercers and things like that. These are like, you know, the Thiels, the Musks, where the Bircher right want to create an authoritarian right-wing fascist government, right? And they want to win the class war by creating a permanent regime of control that uses economic and political and criminal coercion to keep the worker bees in line, right? And wants to discredit any kind of development of a state apparatus that could challenge the power of private money or private power. To kind of have the state be no more than a branding exercise for a certain geographic region, but not contain enough capacity or power to contain private effort, right? So that is the like the far right billionaires, and they've won with Donald Trump. The other faction of capital is the collaborationist faction of capital. That's the faction of capital that believes that if you pursue the policies of the Bircher right, you're actually like the harder you squeeze your grip, the more resistance and problems are going to arise. The more fragile the system will become. The collaborationist billionaires, they want to mollify you. They want to give you a sort of dignified minimum standard of life, right? They want you to be able to have a house, and maybe you get some health care, maybe you'll get some food, you know, you'll have some entertainment. And so the vast majority of your labor is still exploited. You know, you're still producing mega profits for capitalists, but they're providing you enough support that you don't get mad. You know, like, you're not going to blow up the system because why would you? You're overall, you know, you're entertained enough, you're fed enough, you're housed enough, you're distracted enough to just live your life. the fact that half of your labor or 75% of your labor is exploited and put in their pockets doesn't matter because your life is generally okay. So the kind of social democratic or social liberal wing of capital versus the, you know, Hobbesian state of nature Bircher capitalists. Those are the two wings of capital, right? And if you're a leftist like me or a socialist, frequently in a political environment of the United States, you'll be like trying to get Medicare for all, right? Medicare for all is not just supported by socialists. It's also supported by some of those business people that are like, people not having health care get really angry. They might support more radical left-wing parties, more redistribution, more, you know, perhaps even under the right conditions, socialist parties. And that would threaten my position as a capitalist. So I'm going to give concessions like Medicare for all so that people feel buy-in to the system. They feel that their needs are being met at a certain level, and they won't try to overturn my position as a capitalist. So what has happened is the social democratic, social liberal capitalist has been completely swept out of power. They're gone. All right. All that remains is the fascistic, techno-feudalist, I don't know how you would describe it, the Hobbesian state of nature. It is not good, folks.
Cut the federal government's debt every day by billions of dollars, and one of the only ways to do that would be to begin to privatize Social Security. This is what the DNC should be doing. Now, Ken Martin, we had lots of members of the uncommitted movement at the DNC who were being personally bullied by their DNC state parties, and Ken Martin thankfully did intervene to make sure that that didn't happen, and so that was my only personal interaction with him, and he went out of his way to make sure that our uncommitted delegation was treated with respect. Other than that, I don't know that much about him, but I'm looking forward to hopefully he can put together a working class populist agenda for the party that isn't just a fundraising handoff.
So, Lindsay Owens, Doge is not a formal government agency, right? Which means that it doesn't fall into any category.
Yeah, look, I think when President Trump announced that Elon Musk was going to be running the Department of Government Efficiency, there was a sort of tempting fantasy that maybe Musk, a tech but successful businessman, could come in and restore some efficiency in government, maybe modernize some aspects of government that could use some updating. I mean, I think with this weekend's seizure of the Treasury payment system, we can be crystal clear in putting that fantasy to bed. This is Musk determining who is going to get funding in this country, what programs are going to be funded in this country. And remember, Musk isn't a disinterested party here. As we've talked about, he has many federal contracts himself, billions of dollars this year alone to his companies, SpaceX, Tesla, and X, formerly known as Twitter. But he also is interested in cutting this funding for a very personal reason, which is he is interested in paying for the tax cuts that Congress is teeing up this year. They're estimating $5 trillion in tax cuts, mostly going to the wealthy and corporations. And Doge is the entity that is supposedly going to find the money, find the savings to pay for those tax cuts. So I think we can sum it up this way. Elon Musk is going to pay for his tax cut with your Social Security. That's really what we're looking at here. That's what Doge is up to.
Lindsay Owens, we're going to have to leave it there. And I just want to give Waleed the last word. 10 seconds. What should people do right now?
People should go to indivisible.org and visit their Senate office and demand an investigation of Elon Musk, and that Senate business should come to a halt.
The Democrats are voting with the Republicans to appoint. Do you know that Donald Trump has a higher success rate on his committee appointments or his cabinet appointments than almost any president in history? Like, he's succeeding better than almost any other American president.
What is the actual plan to not do rhetoric about fighting for working people, but change the way the Democratic Party approaches people? Because the Democratic Party for a lot of people sounds like a lot of policy and a lot of wonkery, but not a lot of action. Whatever the Republican Party has morphed into as far right and radical as they've become, they represent action. How does the Democratic Party start to show that they're doing something, not just doing rhetoric?
Well, let me tell you something, Joy. The Democratic Party just elected in pretty resounding fashion as well a black kid named Malcolm Kenyatta.
Literally no one cares, dude. No one cares. I bet you're like, your first cousins don't even care. Like, nobody cares. Like, no one cares. Your best friend, if you have one, they probably barely care. Unless they're a Democratic Party grifter trying to get a consulting gig, they probably don't care. No one gives a shit!
From North Philly. And so I think that this is a party and a leadership team that looks like this country. They also...
She said, what are you going to do for actions? And he said, I'm a black guy. This country's mostly white. The country's mostly white. And many Hispanics consider themselves, the majority of Hispanics consider themselves white. Okay, now what? Like, what are you talking about?
Elected Artie Blanco, another vice chair, an incredible leader in the labor movement. And so these are folks who have a history of standing up for working people, a record to show for it, and who have vision for what the next stage of our party.
So she asked him, what is he going to do for real? And it's just bullshit. It's just rhetoric. I'm a black man, and we have, what is this? David Hogg is a midwit. A liberal midwit. I heard that he got like, okay, I'm not gonna intelligence shame, but I heard he got into an Ivy League school with 1270. Now on the SATs. Now, listen, I'm not a test elitist, but you'd have a hard time getting into Penn State with that. And like, so basically he got affirmative action because he goes on MSNBC.
Party is going to be. And here's what it is. You are hitting on something that my sister said to me that I'll never forget. She said, Donald Trump lies with more confidence than Democrats tell the truth. And here's the truth. The Democratic Party is the party of working people and working families. And we're a party that's not going to spend the next 4 years somehow apologizing for being Democrats, somehow apologizing for wanting to protect Medicare and Social Security, apologizing for standing with organized labor, apologizing for protecting people's fundamental rights to be who they are, make decisions about their own bodies. We're not going to do that. But we also are going to be a party, Joy, that looks local. Everything that matters in people's life is not happening in Washington, D.C. And so we have to care just as much about school board races as we do about Senate contests. And that's the type of Democratic Party that you're going to see under this leadership team.
I want you to come back because I want to talk about how you fight a radical movement with politics. And I'm not sure that you can do that. But I would love to have that conversation with you. So we'll keep talking. New DNC Vice Chair, thank you very much. I appreciate you. Malcolm Kenyatta, congratulations and thank you. And up next.
A whole lot of nothing. All right, there's a new thing, new video people have been sending me called Dark Gothic MAGA. And I have been somebody that's been aware of this shit for a very, very long time. I remember when this stuff, there used to be this blog called Secular Right. This is a very, 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 very deep cut. This is like from the blogosphere shit. This is from like 2008, okay? That I used to occasionally read because it was kind of the home of the atheistic fascist. And a lot of the people that began on there, I'm pretty sure Yarvin began on that. Like, this is like long time ago. And I kind of have intuitively known that America was going to have a fascist moment. After the failure of conservatism, like I've always been paying attention to like the paleocons, right? Really, really long time ago. It reminds me of, and it was very, very interesting because I had this one conversation that was done on Hoover Institution with Victor Davis Hanson, I think is his name. And I don't remember the show, but it was on the Hoover Institution. Fuck, there was somebody else. Christopher Hitchens was on it. And they were debating the book by Pat Buchanan called, I think the book is called Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War, which was about World War II. And Pat Buchanan's argument in the book is basically that fighting Hitler was wrong and that we should not have fought Hitler. Wait, you went on a show and talked to Hitchens? No. I'm talking about, like, I've been watching this, like, far right, this kind of sphere of conservatism I've been paying close attention to because I knew it was only a matter of time before the paleocons and the fascists merged. And that's where we're at. But the neoconservatism has, like, fallen. And now we have just full-blown fascistic imperialism.
So I felt like a boot off the throat. Like every morning I wake up happier than the day before because all of these forms of repression that I just had gotten used to.
Hallelujah. Disappeared so far up their own woke asses. If those people stay in control, I think that the Republicans could have an electoral majority as far as the eye can see.
It's really the dawn of a new crypto era.
The future is gonna be amazing!
More than any other sector, the tech industry invested in this election. Crypto accounts for more than half the corporate spend, with no other industry coming close. It's not unusual.
By the way, just in case you know this, that you just want to know, chat, the crypto industry started their entree into politics by going after Bernie Sanders' allied progressives. That's where crypto got into politics, and the Democratic Party welcomed them in, because it was using them to defend and attack the left. And now, crypto said, thanks for all the help, and turned to destroy the Democratic Party itself. Has he already covered Anna going after Hasanabi? No. We'll do that after this. We'll do that after this. It'll be fun to laugh at Anna Kasparian being just like probably the most... What is going on with people? I legitimately don't understand it. What is it about Hassan that causes people to lose their minds? Like, legitimately, what is it? It's crazy. It's the same thing with AOC. AOC, Hassan, it's like the mental illnesses that they cause. Is this the reason?
Okay.
You know what this is? Do you see the problem with this twerk? He doesn't have enough lower back flexibility, and I have the same problem. It's from sitting on the computer too much. It's from sitting on the computer too much because, like, think about your life, right? Like, imagine if you just added 5 to 8 hours of streaming into your current computer usage. That's me. So I'm already sitting at the computer way too fucking much. Wow. Wait, did Mizkif go to Tokyo too? Did Mizkif go to Tokyo?